What are you most proud of in terms of what Feeding America's been able to do in this time?
I think I would have to say I've been most proud of our ability to translate, to quickly get the resources, both financial and in-kind resources and offers of all kinds of in-kind offers of support in terms of planning, et cetera, deployed quickly. So, you know, a good example in a story, you asked for a story in that, one of, I think, our favorite stories out of this is when Jeff Bezos reached out to us wanting to make $100 million gift to our member food banks. And he had very ambitious plan for how quickly he'd like that money executed on the ground, which we couldn't agree more with, but it's not a small task to receive $100 million, deploy it to 200 food banks, to try to get that money where need is the greatest, and get it spent in an environment where the supply chain for food, you couldn't buy food to save your life at the time we got this money. So we were challenged on the front end with this offer of support, and we reached out to our network leadership and said, okay, here's this offer of support, but if we take it, we've got to be able to deliver. And I'm so proud that we've got kind of it's called a national council, which is, we're a federation, so we have leaders from our membership that are elected to that national council. And we all said, we can do it, let's say yes. And so originally, he had wanted the funding to be able to be redeployed within and totally spent within 41 days, and was going to let Feeding America have half that time to work out a process for that and the food banks. And we basically came back and said, listen, we can turn this around a lot faster than that. We'll work day and night to do it. We want our food banks to have as much time as they need to spend this money appropriately to get help to where it's needed most. And so I think it took us 8 days. We got the money on a Friday, wired into our account, and I think we were deploying it literally by the next Friday, so including the weekend days that we worked on this. And we had a data-driven process that drove those resources to where need was the greatest. We had an entire elaborate set of guidelines to help food banks spend that money and deploy it in line with the donors' wishes and in support of what people in their communities needed. And I mean, it was just an incredible story of how everybody had to work together to make that happen as quickly as possible.
So how will Feeding America be stronger in light of a pandemic? Heaven forbid that we'd ever have this happen, but now that it's here, what will be the muscles that you'll have developed in this?
So before I answer sort of about our internal muscle, I think the first thing I would say is, just from a mission perspective, what's really been important about this, though we wish it had never happened, but one of the things that we hope will carry forward is that people prior to the pandemic really wondered if food insecurity was sort of a real thing in this country. In a country as wealthy as ours, with food as ubiquitous as it is in our society, how could it be that people could struggle to put food on the table? And though there were 37 million people who were food insecure prior to the pandemic, now that number's up to about 54 million, we estimate, people really get it, how quickly people can lose their livelihood and find themselves in need of charitable food. So that's really important. In terms of our muscle and our leadership muscle, I think we come out of this as a much more empowered organization. We had to ask people to stop doing their job they were hired to do and completely shift to do an entirely different body of work. And they thrived, right? And people made mistakes, and that was okay. And so we learned that we can still be super effective when we're agile, when we ask people to lean into things, when we give people grace to make mistakes and learn from them, when we're really focused on delivering results for communities and not letting our own internal processes of an organization get too much in the way of delivering results. I think we did a good job of that before, but I think we had to move even faster with this. And so that's something we don't want to lose as we move into a sustained response, and we hope ultimately a recovery, is to keep our eyes really focused on the people we're trying to serve and make sure that we're not overworking our processes so that they in any way get in the way of delivering results for communities. So I think those are, yeah.
2 minutes left. I will wrap up with a question regarding what do you hope the leadership team at Feeding America will be thought of in the backside of this, in that sustained recovery phase?
So I think we will, from my perspective, as a new member to the team, but having the sort of lens as a new member to see how we were functioning for a couple months before, and then in this, we were way more agile, much more responsive to the on the ground, daily, weekly changes happening in communities. We quickly stood up systems that allowed us to have that visibility to what was happening on the ground if that didn't exist before. So so the ability for us to be responsive and agile, but also I will add, in the midst of all that, we were involved in strategic priority setting for the next several years. And we even quickly did, our lessons learned in this pandemic and have shifted priority focus that we're building into our budgets moving forward. So also intentional for the future.